The air in the city park was usually filled with the laughter of children and the rustling of oak leaves. But today, that peace was shattered by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold. It started as a distant wail, growing into a deafening roar of sirens that tore through the afternoon silence. On a solitary bench, an old man sat motionless. His eyes, clouded by the memories of 1,000 battles, didn't even flinch as 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt, kicking up dust and gravel. He looked like a relic of a forgotten era, a man who had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be bothered by a few flashing lights. But this wasn't just a routine stop. The atmosphere was thick with a sudden, inexplicable hostility. The doors flew open, and 3 officers sprang out, their boots thudding heavily on the pavement. These weren't men looking for a conversation. They were hunters closing in on a prey. "Don't move! Keep your hands where we can see them," the lead officer bellowed, his voice trembling with an odd mix of adrenaline and something darker, perhaps fear, or perhaps a hidden malice. The old veteran slowly raised his hands, his expression remaining hauntingly calm, almost pitying. The barrels of 3 service pistols were leveled at his chest, the cold steel glinting under the sun. The park-goers froze, their breath catching in their throats. Why were they treating a defenseless grandfather like a high-level terrorist? What could this man possibly have done to merit such a lethal confrontation? "Rex, attack! Take him down!" The sergeant screamed, his face contorted in a mask of rage. He unclipped the leash of a massive German shepherd, a legendary canine known for his unmatched aggression and perfect record. Rex was a weapon in fur and bone, a creature trained to neutralize any threat without hesitation. The dog shot forward like a black and tan streak of lightning, his paws tearing up the turf as he launched himself toward the seated veteran. The crowd gasped, some turning away to avoid the sight of the impending carnage. It seemed certain that the old man would be shredded in seconds. The officers watched with grim satisfaction, waiting for the sound of tearing fabric and cries of pain. But the scream never came. In a move that defied every instinct and every hour of his rigorous police training, Rex didn't sink his teeth into the man's throat. Instead, as he reached the bench, the dog skidded to a halt, his body pivoting mid-air. He didn't bite, he shielded. Rex planted his powerful paws firmly in the dirt, standing directly between the veteran and the muzzles of the police guns. His fur stood on end, and a low, guttural growl vibrated through his chest. Not directed at the old man, but at his own handlers. The veteran's hand reached out, trembling slightly, and rested gently on the dog's head. In that moment, the predator became the protector, and the law looked like the enemy. Why would a highly trained police dog risk his life to protect a stranger against his own masters? What did this dog see in the old man that the officers refused to acknowledge? As the standoff intensified, a chilling realization began to dawn. The secret behind this confrontation goes much deeper than a simple arrest. There is a dark history buried beneath the surface of this city, a secret that links this veteran to the very heart of the police department. This is just the beginning of a story that will make you question who the real monsters are. Why did Rex choose loyalty over his orders? And what world-shaking truth is the sergeant trying to bury? Stay tuned and watch until the very end, because the truth behind this veteran's identity will leave you breathless. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow this incredible journey of justice and betrayal. Let's dive into the mystery. The city wakes up slowly, but for Harold, the day always begins with the same rhythmic silence. A retired veteran whose medals have long since gathered dust, he is a man defined by his routines and the quiet weight of memories. Every morning, like clockwork, he occupies his throne, a weathered bench in the corner of the park. To the world, he is just a lonely old man watching pigeons. But beneath that tattered military cap lies a mind that still maps the world in terms of perimeters and threats. However, this morning, the solitude he has cultivated for years is no longer his to carry alone. Beside him sits a silent companion, a stranger who appeared out of the shadows just 3 nights ago. This German shepherd didn't come with a collar or a name. It arrived in a state of utter exhaustion, its fur caked in dried mud, and its paws bloodied from miles of unseen travel. Most would have called animal control, but Harold saw something in the dog's eyes, a familiar, haunting hypervigilance that he recognized from his own reflection. It was the gaze of a soldier who had seen too much. He shared his meager rations and cleaned the animal's wounds, and in return, the dog became his shadow, a silent guardian in a world that had forgotten them both. But as the sun climbs higher, the peaceful atmosphere begins to fray. The dog, whom Harold had started calling Chief, suddenly shifts. It doesn't bark. Instead, it rises slowly, its muscles coiling like a spring under tension. Harold feels the change in the air before he hears a thing. Chief's ears twitch, locking onto a frequency far beyond human hearing. A low primal rumble starts deep in the dog's chest, a warning. It isn't the playful growl of a pet, but the calculated threat assessment of a professional. Something is coming, something that doesn't belong in the quiet rhythm of the park. The peace is shattered not by a bang, but by the distant rhythmic thud of heavy boots and the screech of tires on damp asphalt. From the park's main entrance, several dark silhouettes emerge from a fleet of black SUVs, their sirens silenced, but their intent loud and clear. The flashing red and blue lights reflect in Harold's weary eyes as he slowly tightens his grip on his walking cane. He looks down at Chief, whose teeth are now bared in a silent snarl. The storm has arrived, and as the authorities close in, the old soldier realizes that the stray he saved might be the most dangerous and most hunted entity in the city. The fragile peace of Harold's morning is shattered by a heavy, rhythmic pounding on his door. Not the friendly knock of a neighbor, but the cold, demanding strike of authority. When he opens it, the warm sunlight of his small sanctuary is eclipsed by three towering figures. These are not just men, they are the embodiment of the law, dressed in obsidian black tactical gear that smells of cold leather and iron. The contrast is heart-wrenching. Harold, with his stooped shoulders and eyes filled with simple kindness, stands dwarfed by the rigid, unyielding wall of state power. The air in the hallway suddenly feels thin, pressurized by the arrival of men who see the world only in terms of threats and targets. Officer Briggs, a man whose face seems carved from granite and cynicism, steps into the room without an invitation. He doesn't ask questions. He delivers a verdict. His voice, rasping and devoid of empathy, cuts through the silence like a serrated blade. He points a gloved finger toward the corner where the creature rests. To Briggs, this isn't a living soul or a lost companion. He declares it a Class A tactical asset, a piece of high-tech police weaponry that has gone missing. He paints a terrifying picture of a biological engine of destruction, claiming the dog is extremely volatile, out of control, and a ticking time bomb lurking in the heart of the city. Harold's heart hammers against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He looks back at the creature, the same one that had leaned its heavy head against his knee for comfort just an hour ago. He cannot reconcile the lethal weapon Briggs describes with the gentle soul he has glimpsed in those glowing eyes. "He's just a dog," Harold stammers, his voice trembling but fueled by a sudden, flickering spark of defiance. He's been nothing but gentle. He was hurt and he needed help. He moves his frail body, trying to shield the massive beast from the officer's cold stares, a David standing before three Goliaths, armed with nothing but the truth of his own heart. But in the face of absolute power, the truth is often a luxury. Briggs steps closer, his shadow stretching across the floor until it completely engulfs Harold. The creak of his leather holster is the only sound in the room, a silent threat that speaks louder than any shout. He delivers a chilling ultimatum. Any further interference will be treated as a felony, a direct act of treason against public safety. The atmosphere grows suffocating, thick with the scent of ozone and the weight of intimidation. Harold is silenced, not because he believes them, but because he is being crushed by the sheer mechanical indifference of the system. He stands there, helpless and small, realizing that to these men, his compassion is merely a malfunction in their pursuit of a lost piece of hardware. The atmosphere in the park suddenly turns ice cold, the kind of chill that doesn't come from the wind, but from the death of mercy. Briggs, his pride wounded and his authority challenged by a man he considers a mere shadow, finally snaps. He doesn't see a human being in front of him. He sees an obstacle that needs to be crushed. With a voice like grinding stones, he delivers the ultimate ultimatum. He signals the canine unit, beast bred for war, trained to tear through flesh without hesitation. The command is clear, sharp, and utterly heartless. Neutralize the target. The crowd gasps as one. Mothers pull their children close, shielding their eyes from the violence about to unfold. The silence is so heavy, it feels physical. Every eye is fixed on the massive German Shepherd, a creature of pure muscle and instinct. For years, this dog has been a weapon of the state, a loyal servant to the whistle and the whip. It crouches, its claws digging into the manicured grass, ready to launch a strike that could end a life in seconds. The air vibrates with the suppressed energy of a predator about to kill. But then, something miraculous and terrifying happens. As the dog prepares to spring, its gaze meets the old man's. In that split second, a silent war rages within the animal's soul. On one side is the ironclad discipline of years of training, the Pavlovian response to the master's voice. On the other is an ancient primal connection, a recognition of a soul that radiates a warmth the cold barracks could never provide. The dog's ears flicker, its tail drops. It isn't looking at a victim, it is looking at a kindred spirit, a master of a different kind, one who speaks not in commands, but in the language of the heart. The climax of the tension breaks, not with a scream, but with a defiant growl. To the absolute horror of Briggs and his men, the canine unit does not strike. Instead, the dog walks slowly toward the old man, its head bowed in a gesture of profound submission, before turning around to face the soldiers. It bares its fangs, a low guttural rumble vibrating in its chest, a warning to the men in uniform. The weapon has chosen the target as its protector. The hierarchy of power has been shattered by a bond that transcends duty, leaving Briggs standing paralyzed as his own loyal beast chooses the side of the man he intended to destroy. As the mysterious stray dog stands before him, the modern world begins to dissolve, replaced by the searing heat of a memory buried for 31 years. We are transported back to a time when the air didn't smell of pine trees and rain, but of gunpowder and sun-baked sand. This was the desert, a vast, unforgiving wasteland where a young, vibrant Harold served his country. But he wasn't alone. By his side was Ranger, a Belgian Malinois whose intelligence was matched only by his fierce loyalty. They weren't just soldier and canine, they were two halves of a single soul, navigating the minefields of a forgotten war. The silence of the desert was a lie, one that shattered on a Tuesday afternoon that Harold would never forget. A hidden IED, a cruel, silent predator beneath the sand, detonated with a roar that swallowed the sky. In an instant, the world turned upside down. The shockwave was a physical wall of heat and metal that tore through everything in its path. Harold felt the ground vanish beneath him, his ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that drowned out his own screams. Through the haze of rising black smoke and swirling dust, his last vision before drifting into unconsciousness was Ranger being thrown back by the blast, barking a frantic, desperate warning that came too late. Pain was the only thing Harold knew for weeks, but the physical agony was nothing compared to the heartbreak that followed. When he finally woke up in a military hospital, he begged for news of his partner. But the military is a machine of cold logic and rigid protocols. Because of his severe injuries, Harold was being sent home permanently. Ranger, however, was still considered government property. Despite Harold's tearful pleas and desperate rages, the regulations were unyielding. A soldier could go home, but a war dog belonged to the front. They were separated by a sea of bureaucracy, a cruel parting that left a hole in Harold's heart that 3 decades couldn't heal. Back in the present, Harold's breath hitches in his chest. He looks at the stray dog, this beast that the neighbors feared, and he doesn't see a random animal. He sees the same tilt of the head, the same scar-like marking near the ear, and most importantly, that piercing, soul-searching gaze that he last saw in the middle of a war zone. The odds are impossible. 31 years have passed. It's a lifetime for a human and several for a dog. Yet, the connection is undeniable. Is it a ghost? A reincarnation? Or is the universe finally trying to pay back a debt it owed to a lonely soldier? The memories aren't just coming back, they are standing right in front of him, wagging a tail. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. As the crowd holds its breath, the old man, whom everyone dismissed as a mere vagabond, reaches up with a steady hand. He slowly removes his worn hat, revealing a face etched with the history of 1,000 battles. A deep silver scar carves a path across his cheek, a silent testament to a life lived on the edge of survival. He isn't just a bystander, he is a ghost from a forgotten era. With a voice like grinding stones, he declares his truth. He was once a master canine trainer for the most elite Special Forces unitsmen, who moved in the shadows and spoke a language only the bravest of beasts could understand. The commanding officer sneers, ready to dismiss him as a lunatic. But Harold doesn't wait for permission. He steps into the dog's kill zone with a calm that defies logic. He doesn't scream, he doesn't use a leash. Instead, he begins a silent symphony of movement. His fingers snap into a sharp downward angle signal, lost to modern manuals, but burned into the DNA of legendary war dogs. He taps his chest twice, right over his heart, a rhythmic thud that resonates with the authority of a general. These are the silent codes, the ancient signals of the canine elite, designed to be used when even a whisper could mean death. The transformation is instantaneous and chilling. The beast, which seconds ago was a whirlwind of fur and fury, suddenly freezes. The growling stops. The bared teeth are hidden as the dog drops into a perfect, rigid sit position, its eyes locked onto Harold with a level of devotion that no officer present had ever witnessed. The young policemen, still clutching their tasers and batons, feel a cold shiver run down their spines. They look at their shouting superior, then back at the silent old man who has tamed the storm with a single gesture. Doubts begin to flicker in their eyes like dying embers. They realize they aren't just watching a rescue. They are witnessing a masterclass from a man who has forgotten more about discipline than their instructors will ever know. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife, as Harold ignores the shouting officers and the glint of their drawn weapons. His focus is singular, his movements steady despite the chaos. He isn't looking at the dog as a threat, but as a long-lost brother. As his calloused fingers move through the matted, dark coat, he isn't just checking for injuries, he is looking for the mark of a legend. There, beneath the grime of the streets, he finds it, a jagged, intentional notch on the left ear, and a faint silver-white line tracing down the hind legs, scars that weren't born from street fights, but from a heritage of sacrifice. Harold's breath hitches. This isn't just any dog. This creature carries the elite, untainted bloodline of the Ranger unit, the legendary guardians who were once the final line of defense between order and absolute shadow. The dog isn't a stray, he is a fallen prince of a forgotten war. Harold rises slowly, his spine straightening with a dignity that suddenly makes the armed men before him look small. The officers bark orders for him to step away from the unstable beast, but Harold's gaze is like ice. He doesn't flinch. Instead, he turns the weight of his stare toward them, his voice dropping to a low, resonant rumble that carries the authority of a judge delivering a final verdict. "You keep calling him unstable," Harold says, his words cutting through the rain like a blade. "But you've got it all wrong. He isn't reacting to my weakness. He's reacting to your truth. He isn't protecting me from the badge you wear. He's protecting me from the darkness you carry underneath it." The dog lets out a low, vibrating growl, not of mindless rage, but of calculated warning. The revelation hangs heavy in the air, chilling the officers to their core. Harold's voice rises, filled with a haunting certainty. He isn't a monster, he is a mirror. He doesn't fear your gun, she smells the evil inside you, the corruption you think you've hidden so well. To the world, he's a stray, but to you, he is the judge you never wanted to face. In this moment, the predator and the protector have swapped roles, and the hunt has officially changed direction. The atmosphere thickens with a tension so sharp it could draw blood. As the dust settles from the previous confrontation, all eyes aren't on the heroic canine, but on the man supposed to be his partner. Officer Briggs isn't just angry, he's unhinged. There's a frantic, jagged edge to his voice that transcends professional frustration. He isn't acting like a lawman who has lost control of a tool. He's acting like a man who has looked into the eyes of his own judgment and is terrified of what he sees. His hand trembles, not from fear of the dog, but from a desperate, burning need to silence the animal forever. Why would a veteran officer be so hell-bent on destroying a high-value asset? A canine unit is worth tens of thousands of dollars and years of specialized training. Yet Briggs treats this dog like a ticking time bomb. Every time the dog barks, every time those intelligent eyes scan the crowd, Briggs flinches as if a secret is being screamed aloud. His insistence that the dog is broken or rabid feels less like a diagnosis and more like a cover story being written in real time. He's looking for any excuse: a growl, a sudden movement, a misplaced step-toe, pull that trigger, and bury the evidence under a pile of official reports. But the world is watching. The digital age has stripped away the shadows where men like Briggs used to hide. In the hands of the growing crowd, smartphones become shields and witnesses. The lens doesn't lie. The people see the contrast, a dog that has shown more restraint and heroism than the man holding the badge. A murmur ripples through the onlookers, a collective realization that the threat isn't the animal with the sharp teeth, but the man with the loaded gun and the guilty conscience. The cameras are rolling, capturing every bead of sweat on Briggs' forehead and every flicker of malice in his eyes. The irony is suffocating. Briggs claims the dog is a danger to the public, yet the dog stands as the most composed figure in the street. The animal's silence is more damning than any testimony. It's as if the dog knows that by simply existing, by simply refusing to be the monster Briggs needs him to be, he is dismantling the officer's career piece by piece. Briggs is cornered, not by teeth, but by the truth. And a cornered man is the most dangerous predator of all. The question isn't whether the dog will bite. It's whether Briggs will crack before the sirens of internal affairs arrive. But justice has a scent, and so does betrayal. Just as Briggs thought he had successfully navigated the storm, the atmosphere shifts violently. Ranger, the loyal partner who had been silent until now, doesn't just growl, he erupts. This isn't the bark of a confused animal. It's a rhythmic, authoritative accusation. The dog's eyes are locked onto Briggs, his snout twitching with a precision that no human technology could replicate. To Ranger, the air around Briggs doesn't smell like cheap coffee or rain anymore. It reeks of the very poison they had sworn to eradicate from the streets. The silence that follows is deafening. A dozen eyes, colleagues, rivals, and the suspicious public turn toward Briggs. The pressure in the air becomes physical, a heavy weight pressing down on his shoulders. Ranger doesn't alert for no reason, a senior officer mutters, his voice cold and devoid of the usual camaraderie. Under the searing glare of the streetlights and the judgmental gaze of those he once led, Briggs's arrogance begins to shatter like thin glass. He tries to protest, his voice cracking, but the demand is unanimous. There is no escape, no backroom deal to be made here. He is forced to unbutton his jacket, his fingers fumbling with the very fabric that once symbolized his authority. As the jacket falls open, the truth spills out into the harsh light. Tucked away in a hidden inner pocket are the unmistakable packets, the high-grade narcotics that had vanished from the evidence locker of a previous high-profile bust. The crowd gasps, a collective realization hitting them like a physical blow. It wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, cold-blooded swap. Ranger hadn't just found drugs. He had unearthed the rot within the system. The dog stands tall, his mission accomplished, while Briggs stands exposed, not as a hero, but as a traitor who traded his badge for a piece of the chaos he was supposed to stop. The hunter has finally become the prey. The scales of justice had finally balanced, but the weight of the truth proved to be a burden too heavy for a tired heart to bear. Just as the echoes of the revelation settled, Harold felt a sharp, icy grip tighten inside his chest. The adrenaline that had fueled his long crusade evaporated in an instant, leaving behind only the crushing reality of his fragile mortality. The victory he had fought so hard for felt hollow as his knees buckled, and the world began to tilt into a terrifying abyss. He collapsed like a mountain crumbling into the sea. There was no dramatic cry, only the soft thud of a body hitting the cold, uncaring concrete. In that moment, the hero who had unmasked the darkness was himself being claimed by a different kind of shadow. The crowd, once frozen in shock by the truth, now surged forward in a chaotic wave of panic, their voices a muffled roar in Harold's fading consciousness. But before the first hand could reach him, a thunderous growl cut through the air like a crack of lightning. Ranger, the silent shadow who had never left Harold's side, transformed into a ferocious sentinel of fur and steel. He stood astride his fallen master, his muscles coiled like a spring, a primal warning vibrating from his throat. To the dog, the approaching crowd wasn't a source of help. They were a sea of strangers threatening the man who was his entire world. The standoff was a testament to a bond forged in fire. Ranger wouldn't let a single soul touch Harold until he saw the white light of the paramedics and the familiar scent of antiseptic and oxygen. With an uncanny, near-human intelligence, the dog sensed the difference between a curious onlooker and a savior. As the medics approached with their life-saving equipment, Ranger stepped back just enough to grant them passage, his eyes never leaving Harold's pale face, acting as both a guardian and a silent witness to the struggle for life. In the heart of the chaos, a scene of profound tenderness unfolded that silenced the surrounding turmoil. Between the frantic shouts of the medics and the rhythmic pumping of a chest, Ranger leaned down. He began to lick Harold's cold, limp hand with a desperate, rhythmic devotion. It was more than just an instinct. It was as if the dog was trying to breathe his own vibrant spirit into the man who had given him a home. Each lick was a prayer, a silent plea for his partner to wake up and share in the victory they had achieved together. The sound of metal clicking shut echoed like a death knell through the cold marble halls of the precinct. Briggs, the man who had once held the power of life and death in his hands, now stood exposed and broken. The mask of authority he had worn for decades had finally shattered, leaving behind only a trembling shadow of a man with cold sweat dripping down his temple. As federal agents led him away, the very air in the station seemed to shift, as if a long-standing fog of corruption was finally being swept away by the harsh, unforgiving wind of justice. He was no longer the hunter, he was the prey, facing a future behind bars where the men he had once wrongly imprisoned would be waiting for him. But the arrest of one man was merely the tip of a massive, frozen iceberg. A sweeping investigation was launched immediately, tearing through years of redacted files and falsified reports that had been buried deep within the department's servers. The question on everyone's lips was chilling. How could a system designed to protect the innocent allow someone like Briggs to manipulate the truth so easily? Investigators uncovered a labyrinth of deceit, altered body cam footage, bribed witnesses, and a paper trail of lies that had systematically painted the Ranger as a villain. It was a wake-up call for the entire city, revealing a systemic rot that had allowed a hero to be hunted like a common criminal while the real wolf sat at the head of the table. In the locker rooms and quiet corners of the precinct, a heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the younger officers. These were men and women who had joined the force with idealistic dreams of protecting the weak, yet they had spent months blindly following orders to hunt down the only man truly fighting for the city. They looked at their badges, once symbols of pride, and felt only the weight of their own ignorance. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. They hadn't been the heroes of this story. They had been the unwitting pawns of a tyrant. As they watched the evidence of the Ranger's innocence unfold on the screens, a profound sense of remorse took hold, knowing they had almost become the very evil they had sworn to destroy. The sterile, sharp scent of disinfectant is the first thing that greets Harold as he slowly drifts back to consciousness. The world is a blur of clinical white and soft gold, but as his vision stabilizes, he feels a familiar, heavy warmth resting against the side of his bed. There, sitting with the quiet, unwavering dignity of a sentinel, is the dog. No muzzles, no heavy chains, and no fear in his eyes. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, the chaos has fallen silent, replaced by the steady, rhythmic breathing of a partner who refused to let him go into the darkness alone. The silence of the room is eventually broken by the muffled sound of polished boots on linoleum. A high-ranking official from the department enters, but the air is devoid of the usual tension. In a moment of profound humility and public reckoning, the department offers more than just an apology. They offer a tribute. Recognizing the injustice that had been set in motion, the city officially grants the dog an honorable discharge from service. The ownership papers are signed and handed over, a symbolic gesture of returning a soul to the man who saved it. The beast the world wanted to destroy is now, officially and forever, Harold's companion. As Harold's trembling hand reaches out to stroke the thick, coarse fur behind the dog's ears, the animal lets out a long, contented sigh, leaning his weight into the touch. These are two survivors, two relics of different wars who were nearly discarded by the very society they protected. The scars on Harold's heart and the trauma in the dog's eyes begin to heal in the quietude of this reunion. They are no longer a fugitive and a weapon. They are simply two broken souls who found the missing pieces of themselves in each other. When the day finally comes to leave the white walls behind, they walk out together, not as shadows in the night, but as heroes in the light. The city hums around them, indifferent as always, but for Harold and his loyal friend, the world has changed. The path ahead is no longer paved with fear or the sound of sirens, but with the soft rustle of leaves and the promise of a quiet porch. They step into the golden glow of the setting sun, two warriors finally laying down their arms, ready to embrace the one thing they both fought so hard to find: a home. As the dust settles on this intense journey, we are left with more than just a story of survival. We are left with a profound reflection on the essence of loyalty and the true meaning of justice. This isn't just a tale about an old man and his dog. It is a testament to the unbreakable bond forged in the fires of conflictabond that the modern, fast-paced world often fails to understand. Harold and his faithful German shepherd represent the silent guardians who have been pushed to the fringes of society, forgotten by the very people they once swore to protect. The core of this narrative resonates so deeply because it touches on a raw, uncomfortable truth: the way we treat our veterans and our elders. Through Harold's eyes, we see a world that has grown cold and judgmental, where a person's worth is often measured by their appearance rather than their character. But as we've witnessed, beneath that weathered exterior and the tattered clothes lies the spirit of a Leona man who carries the weight of history in his stride and the fire of justice in his heart. Why did this story go viral? Why did it capture the hearts of millions across social media? It's because it satisfies a primal human craving for righteous retribution. We live in a world where the little guy often feels powerless against the arrogant and the wealthy. Seeing Harold, a man dismissed as a nobody, stand his ground and dismantle his enemies with the precision of a master tactician provides a catharsis that is both thrilling and deeply satisfying. It serves as a powerful reminder: never mistake silence for weakness, and never, ever judge a book by its tattered cover. The lesson Harold leaves us with is simple yet profound. True honor doesn't need a stage or a spotlight. It exists in the quiet moments of sacrifice, in the decision to protect the innocent when no one is watching, and in the unwavering devotion to a companion who would give their life for yours. Harold didn't seek out the fight, but when the shadows closed in, he became the light that exposed the corruption of the powerful. As we close the final chapter of this incredible saga, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. In a world where it's so easy to look away, how far would you go to protect the only friend you have left? If you were in Harold's shoes, would you have the courage to stand before the barrel of a gun to shield your dog? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another epic journey. Thank you for watching, and remember, loyalty is a choice, but honor is a lifestyle. See you in the next story.